Welcome to Inside the Trenches. I'm Lenny Ventimiglia,
And I'm Noah Adamek.
and this is a show where we talk about what is going on inside the NFL, what's going on around the league, and wow, it has been absolutely crazy recently inside the NFL. Free agency just kicked off this past week on Thursday, and it's been pretty mind-boggling at this point. But before we jump into any of that, I just want to let you guys know what we're going to talk about here on the show today. Today we're going to talk about some of our favorite signings, winners and losers, and biggest surprises so far of free agency. And we figured because March Madness is really starting to kick off and the Final Four is going to be starting to take place soon, we made a little game of our own called the Final Four, and we're going to talk about Tony Romo's Final Four destinations and where we would sign if we were him, not necessarily what we think he will do. So that's going to be a little game we're going to play towards the end of the show, but we're basically covering a lot about free agency, giving our opinions on a lot of the signings, as well as just kind of recapping what has happened in the last week, because we were gone for spring break. And speaking of which, Noah, how was your spring break?
It was pretty good. I didn't do too much, but it's always good to get that relaxation in. Ate good because I was back home, so went to all my favorite places, and yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah, I went downtown for the Combine from about Thursday to Sunday, and I actually was able to get inside of the Combine, but a friend bailed on me, and I wasn't able to go in. So I stayed at home and watched John Ross run that 4.22, and we had talked last week with our guest Jeff Risden about who may break the record if anyone were to do so. I don't think any of us actually expected someone would break the record, but oh my, 4.22 for John Ross that's outstanding. That was the record. So the record was a 4.24 for Chris Johnson, and now we have a new record holder, and he even pulled up with a cramp and a limp at the end of the run and still broke the record. That was incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing, especially with the cramping. I mean, I can't even imagine running 10 yards with a cramp in my leg, especially at that speed. So that's nuts. The Combine was really interesting too. There were some guys that really boosted their stock. There's some guys that really stood out. And to me, just real quick, I'd like to shout out Obi Melifanu, who is a safety who's coming out this year. In my opinion, think he won the Combine. He was nuts. He had a crazy vertical. He was, I want to say, in the top 10 fastest defensive backs. And I mean, he showed what he can do, and that's going to help boost his stock, along with Hassan Reddick and Cooper Kupp. Hassan Reddick, the linebacker, and Cooper Kupp, the receiver, who both had good days. I think they both boost their stock as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys at the Combine, I was watching, like you said, Hassan Reddick was a good one. Cooper Kupp, I thought he actually had a poor performance for what everyone was expecting for him. I think he did decent in the drills, but in some of his actual numbers, like his 40-yard dash and such, I don't think he did such a great job there. But he did look good during the drills. And your guy who you said won the Combine, can you say his name again for me just for fun?
Obi Melifanu.
Say that name 5 times fast. I really did enjoy watching the Combine, though. There was some guys, a lot of people were saying how Myles Garrett, he's an absolute freak of nature. He put up incredible numbers in the 40-yard dash and in the vertical jump. But watching him in those drills, I thought he looked kind of clumsy. I know I'm really nitpicking, and I understand he's going to go first overall, and there's a reason he's going first overall. He just kind of seemed like he was tripping over his own feet, and there was a drill where you had to step over the bags, and he was staring at his feet the entire time, and they kept yelling, "Keep your eyes up," and he never even attempted to look up. I thought he looked kind of either lazy or clumsy going through some of the drills, which maybe that raises a red flag just to me, because I understand he's a freak of nature athlete, but it just kind of caught me by surprise. I wasn't really expecting to see that from a guy who's supposed to go number 1 overall.
Yeah, and that could be nerves too. And I mean, he's going out there, he's trying to do the best he can, gets his nerves up. But I mean, you can teach that guy pretty much anything. He's already got all that talent. He just needs the teaching. So yeah, like you said, he's most likely going to go first overall, and he'll probably be a really good player in the NFL.
And honestly, here in just a couple weeks, we're going to be talking about the draft a lot more, because that's where the focus is going to start shifting here pretty soon. Free agency, even though we're still kind of in the middle of it, the big wave where everyone cares and the frenzy of free agency is kind of already over a little bit. Now it's really just trickling in a couple signings every day, and the focus is going to start shifting to the draft, but we're still about a month and a half away from that. So let's get into free agency a little bit, and let's talk about some of our favorite signings that happened. And so much has happened since we last looked, you know what I mean? mean? Like every time you turn your head, it seems like someone signed, especially at the end of last week on Thursday and Friday, where it just every 10 minutes it seemed like there was a new tweet coming out from Schefter or Rappaport saying one of these guys signed. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite signings, and this happened actually pretty shortly after we left the studio before spring break. Just a couple days later. I really wish we could have touched on it at the time, but Brandon Marshall signed to the New York Giants, and I think that's pretty significant. The Giants lost Victor Cruz, and so right now they had a great slot player, and they had Odell Beckham, but they didn't really have a true second receiver to put out there, and they signed a pretty big stud in Brandon Marshall, a big body that can go out there and catch the ball and really take some attention that you feel like needs to go to Odell Beckham away, and I just feel like it really opens up that pass attack to be just lethal.
Yeah, and especially the fact that he's a completely different type of receiver than they've had in a while. He's more that possession guy who will go up, red zone threat, jump up over guys and snag the ball. They have Sterling Shepard and Odell, obviously, who are more smaller speed guys, route runners. But then you got Marshall on the other side, who's going to be a completely new weapon for Manning, who can pretty much just throw it up to him, and he'll go up there and grab the ball. So I think they have one of the best receiving groups in the NFL now. You can put them right up there with, Denver with Sanders and Thomas. Even if you want to count New England now with Cooks and Gronk and Edelman and all those guys.
That's more of just a core that's just unbeatable. Their receiving core is insane. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but my Lord.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with one of my favorite guys. If that's cool with you.
Go ahead.
Danny Woodhead to the Ravens. I like Danny Woodhead. I shouldn't say I like Danny Woodhead. I like him as like what he can bring to your team, but as a player and what he's done to the Broncos in past years with the Patriots and the Chargers, not a fan. But I do like what he can do for your team. He's an amazing pass catching back. That's Ray Rice was really good at that a few years back with the Ravens. He was good for Joe Flacco. I think this can bring that back for Flacco and can add a completely new twist to their running back game. And he's going to help them out there.
I like that signing as well. I think that might be the biggest or one of the biggest deals so far for running backs in free agency, which is kind of surprising considering some of the names that are out there on the market. Mm-hmm. But he is a dual threat guy, and that kind of drives his price up because he's more than just a running back. He also is basically a receiver out of the backfield. Another signing I really liked was Terrell Pryor to the Redskins. I like this signing because of, one, the price you got him at only 1 year for $8 million. Granted, it's only a 1-year deal, so it's not like this is going to be, changing for this franchise for getting this signing, but I liked it from the standpoint that you lost Deshaun Jackson and you lost Pierre Garçon. You lost your top two receivers, and you replaced them really well and seamlessly. You got Terrell Pryor to be your true number one. And then last year, you drafted Josh Doxson kind of in anticipation of this happening this year. You got him in the first round. And so now, if he comes back from this injury, you have two legitimate good receivers on the outside, a first-round pick in Josh Doxson, Terrell Pryor, who was a stud in Cleveland, and you've really replaced your two receivers that left, and you might even have a better duo now than you had last season.
It's possible, and I like Terrell Pryor just because he can do so many different things. He's not just a receiver. As we all know, he came into the league as a quarterback, so he can run out there at any position and go give you some production. But my second guy is Stephon Gilmore to the Patriots. This guy I've always liked. I always thought he was a really solid corner in Buffalo, and he's still pretty young. So that's good for the Patriots. The only thing is they spent a lot of money on him, which is kind of unusual for them. But he's definitely the top corner and was the top corner in free agency. So they snagged him. I think that's great signing, especially because they lost Malcolm Butler, was it?
He's a restricted free agent, so they haven't necessarily lost him. I think a lot of people think Malcolm Butler wants to go back to the Patriots, but he's actually meeting with the Saints, and there's been talks of him maybe signing and trading away from New England, because I know he was a little upset about them signing Gilmore because they told Butler last year, we do not sign corners for more than $10 million a year.
Yeah.
And then they go and give a double-digit contract or a double-digit $1 million contract to Gilmore, so they basically lied to his face. And I think he's hurt by that a little bit.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick another guy, I think this one of all these on my list, this might be the one that stood out to me the most when it happened. And it's one I don't think got enough coverage, but Tony Jefferson to the Ravens. Pairing him up with Eric Weddle, that safety duo now is nasty that you have in Baltimore. Tony Jefferson, if for those of you who don't know, was a safety last season for the Cardinals. And he was really good at guarding tight ends. He can take away some of your big threats. He's great in coverage, but he's also a guy who can come up to the line of scrimmage and stop the run. And pairing that with a guy like Eric Weddle, I think you have a really, really good duo of safeties. Especially for a team that you always think of defensively. When you think of the Ravens, it's like the Steelers. You kind of historically have thought about them as a defensive-minded team, and I think for the Ravens, it's kind of gotten away from that a little bit when you've lost some of those star defensive players you had, like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, Haloti Ngata. By losing some of these guys, the focus has shifted to offense, but you can tell they're trying to establish that defensive identity again by getting a guy like Tony Jefferson.
Yeah, that's good for the Ravens, signing a bunch of guys now. They re-signed their defensive tackle, Brandon Williams. So yeah, they're loading back up. It's good for them. Another team that's loading up once again through free agency is the Jaguars. They signed A.J. Boye, who is another one of my favorite signings. He's another one of those top corners, probably the second best corner in free agency. And I'm a defensive guy, so I like those defensive guys. I like the Jags looking to upgrade their defense. They weren't terrible last year, but they lost Prince Amukamara, so they're going to have to find somebody else, and they did that in a really solid corner.
I think they upgraded from Prince Mukamara there. I think A.J. Boye is a great corner. I watched a few games with him on the Texans last season, and I was blown away. He was just flat out balling for the Texans. He's a great corner. In my opinion, you could even say he's up there with Stephon Gilmore as maybe even the top corner on the market this year, but it's kind of hard when a guy only does it for 1 year. You like to see consistency, and Gilmore has given you more consistency than Boye has after Boye comes off an incredible year with the Texans. But I think pairing him, especially with the signing of Calais Campbell for the Jags, they really are taking an approach of trying to make that defense formidable, and I thought they've been doing a good job in drafts recently, in free agency. They're spending a ton of money, but they really want to make sure that they have a defense that can hang with anybody in the league. And if there's anything that was a strength for that team last year, because there wasn't a whole lot of it, it was the defensive side of the ball, and now you're getting even better. So I agree that's a great signing. A signing, and again, I think flew under the radar and not a lot of people are talking about. Former left tackle for the Cincinnati Bengals, Andrew Whitworth, signed to the LA Rams. I thought that was a phenomenal signing. The Rams had a horrible left tackle situation. Greg Robinson, the guy they signed out of Auburn, or they drafted out of Auburn, rather, just a couple years ago, second overall, has not really panned out for them as a pass protector, and he was drafted more with him as a good run blocker in mind. So I think if you can shift him into guard, you may really have done something to your offensive line now by getting a Pro Bowl left tackle and a run mauling guard. So I really like that signing for the Rams, especially when you have a young quarterback like Jared Goff you're trying to protect.
Yeah, he's one guy that I wish the Broncos got, but instead they go with a tackle from Oakland in Menelik Watson. Was the Raiders one of the Raiders' best offensive linemen last year, and he should be able to hold up that Broncos offensive line this year. Especially because last year they could not find anybody for that right tackle position. He's most likely going to be that right tackle. Could be left tackle also with Okung leaving. But yeah, I mean, they got a tackle. They picked up a tackle. That's pretty much what I wanted them to do first over this offseason, and that's what they did. So I'm really happy with that signing.
Yeah, and the final signing that I was really happy with in free agency was Lawrence Timmons to the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins ranked 30th in run defense last year. Lawrence Timmons has not missed a game in a decade for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Comes in, moves seamlessly into the linebacker spot, probably a middle linebacker for the Dolphins, and he's very, very good at stopping the run and just shooting forward. He shoots first and asks questions later, and that's something that the Dolphins really could use on such a poor run defense. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about free agency, and we're going to start off here right out of the break with our biggest surprises from this free agency period. My first one, I would say the Packers didn't push hard enough to get TJ Lang. He signed in the division just like Josh Sitton did a year ago. They've lost their 2 Pro Bowl guards in the last year to division rivals, and that's pretty surprising to me because I thought TJ Lang, I told you, I believe the last time we spoke, that would be my number one priority for the Packers this offseason was make sure you get Lang back. And it looks like they did try to get him back. maybe they just didn't do enough. I'm not really sure what the Packers are doing this offseason. They've lost some good players, and this is the one that I felt like they needed to keep the most.
Yeah, that was a surprise. But for me, it's more about guys that signed with teams that I was shocked about. And my first guy is one of my favorite signings. It's Stephon Gilmore. To me, it's just shocking because the Patriots gave him so much money. They don't usually give that much money, especially to defensive backs.
To anybody.
To anybody.
They saw Chandler Jones' contract was coming up, and they sent him out of town. Same thing with Jamie Collins. They never spend big. So you must know that Bill Belichick must love Stephon Gilmore. And they played him twice a year when he was in Buffalo. So this really tells you something about what Bill Belichick thinks of Stephon Gilmore. He must really love this guy.
Yeah, so, I mean, basically what we're saying is watch out for Stephon Gilmore because that guy who is already good is going to a team that makes anybody look so much better. So just watch out for this guy. I'm pretty
scared of that. I'm not going to lie. And if they keep Butler, I'm really scared because Butler's a decent number one, but you pair him with a legitimate number one as well, man, look out. So that was definitely shocking to me. I don't know. I did not know that Bill Belichick loves Stephon Gilmore that much. It's not like a guy I expect he'd go spend a lot of money on. That was not even a place I thought Stephon Gilmore would want to go to, nor did I think that was a team that was going to go shopping big at corner. So, like you said, big surprise there. Another big surprise to me is just the running back market as a whole right now. You have guys like Jamal Charles and Adrian Peterson and Latavius Murray just struggling to find work. Eddie Lacy was struggling to find work until just a couple hours ago when he signed with the Seattle Seahawks. And that's even, you can add that to the list of things that are surprising. Is that on your list?
It is, yeah.
Let's just talk about that one right now and just get it out of the way because we're on the topic. But Eddie Lacy going to the Seahawks does not make much sense to me. They have a pretty good little core of running backs already up in Seattle with Thomas Rawls, who I like. I understand he had a lot of injury problems. CJ Procise, who's kind of a receiver out of the backfield. They just drafted him last year. And then Alex Collins, who you just drafted last year as well out of Arkansas. Now you add Eddie Lacy into the mix, who I don't even know if he's going to be a true number one for you. You paid him like he's going to be. But he has a lot of weight issues, which is no secret. And then also he has injury issues.
Yeah, Eddie Lacy, he could be your number one. He has a potential, but like you said, he's got to keep that weight off, and he's got to stay healthy. He's definitely the kind of guy that they like over there. He's a Marshawn Lynch kind of pound it down your throat type of guy. But I was just surprised because, as you said, they have three guys out there, and two of them I think are potential starters. Maybe not top-notch NFL running backs, but potential starters. So I was surprised by that. And also, they've been going after Jamal Charles, too. They've had interest in him. So I don't understand what they're trying to do over there.
I have no idea.
I was just really surprised.
Especially with a team that has such a weak offensive line. And they're trying to build it. They tried to get TJ Lang as well, and that didn't exactly work out. And I understand they're trying to build their offensive line, but it's like, what are you doing? I'm really confused by Seattle. I really am, especially with Pete Carroll, who was a guy when he was at USC. I don't know if you remember this or not. He had Lendale White was his running back, and Lendale White ballooned up and became this big guy who was out of shape and wasn't playing so well either. And now you go get a similar kind of guy with Eddie Lacy. It's just kind of all confusing to me what's going on in Seattle. But Pete Carroll's one of the best coaches in the league, and I'm just going to trust that he knows what he's doing, even though maybe I shouldn't. Another surprise for me would be the Brock Osweiler trade. I was on Twitter when this trade happened. I had just refreshed my page, and it said about 5 seconds ago, Schefter's tweet popped up and said, wow, so this is surprising. Brock Osweiler traded to the Browns. I was jaw-dropped. That was not what I expected. The last thing I expected was anybody wanted to pay $16 million for Brock Osweiler after what we just saw. And then when I had time to process it a little bit, it made a little bit more sense when we talked about the Browns just trying to buy that second-round pick. But right away, my jaw was on the floor when I read that.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I saw it and I thought, why would the Browns want that?
I was so confused. Why? At first, my first thought was what a Browns thing to do.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I thought too. But then I thought, okay, the Texans are geniuses. I mean, yeah, sure, they only get a fourth-round pick in return.
We should have put them in the winners of free agency just because they got rid of that contract.
I mean, yeah, but then, I don't know. I mean, you get a fourth-round pick in return. You can pretty much do whatever you want with that. That's a decent pick. But then I thought, okay, well, what are they going to do at quarterback now? Because when you think about it, all right, Tony Romo was probably going to be a free agent, or they could trade for him. But that's probably not going to happen. So what are they going to do? Who are the other options at quarterback out there? And I thought, okay, well, Jay Cutler maybe, and he did get released, but I don't think
That's
he's
an
going to go
interesting
there.
thought. I don't think he's going to go there either, even though I haven't really thought about him going there. Tony Romo, I think, is one of the big expectations. But even if they don't get him, there is a draft to be had. Maybe Bill O'Brien just wants to go and get his own guy. He just wants to handpick his own guy. Maybe that's what he wants. Because whatever happened with Brock did not work out. And just imagine being Brock Osweiler. Think about this. A team gave another team a second-round pick so they would take you off their hands. Teams don't give up second-round picks for very much at all. It's hard to get a second-round pick. That's a valuable thing in the NFL. And they gave it to someone to take you away from them. And then that team got you and then said, we don't actually want you. We just wanted the pick. So if the Browns don't want you at quarterback, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just a mind-blowing scenario. And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest surprising trades I've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure. And as you said, they just gave away that second-round pick. So do you really think they're going to try and get a quarterback? Because, I mean...
Who knows? The second-round pick was for next year, not this year, too. So, I mean, granted, they have plenty of picks this year if they want a quarterback, but this pick that they just got in that trade was actually for 2018.
Right, but even so, like, do they really want to get a quarterback this year? Because, okay, if I'm the Texans, who's your last, like, good quarterback? Matt Schaub?
He might be the only good quarterback they've ever had.
Exactly. So why would you not say, okay, we have all the pieces, we need a quarterback? Why would you draft one and develop him, especially in this quarterback class?
Quarterback is so hard to find. Maybe they have a guy I mean, they wouldn't have done this deal if they didn't have someone in mind. It seemed like things were breaking down with Bill O'Brien and Brock Osweiler in the locker room, too. It seemed like that was becoming a toxic relationship from some of the reports that I've read, where they were getting into screaming matches with each other and just disagreeing. And I think they would rather, honestly, just, even if they had to, they'd probably rather just play Tom Savage than Brock Osweiler at this point. They basically did towards the end of the season anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, he didn't look awful, but he's definitely not a starting quarterback, just like Mike Glennon, not a starting quarterback. There's not many good quarterbacks in the league,
It's
honestly.
very hard. It's very hard to find a quarterback, and in my opinion, it's probably the single hardest thing to do in sports for a front office is to find a quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. But I think they definitely will be. I mean, to me, I just think they're definitely going to be going after Tony Romo, and they say they don't want to trade for him, but I think they're going to have to go after him.
Another big surprise to me is going to be the Browns letting Terrell Pryor walk. We talked about this a little bit, kind of with Alshon Jeffrey. You have $100 million to spend. You still have like $60 or $70 million left to spend. And you let a guy go sign somewhere for 1 year and $8 million, but you were willing to take a $16 million deal for a quarterback that you don't even want on your team. That is kind of weird. We talked about kind of paying your own. I thought they did a great job paying Joe Bitonio. I thought that was kind of the start of them paying their own. You know, they have all this money. You might as well give it to the guys who have proved it for our team. Then they have their best playmaker on offense, and they let him leave for $8 million when I feel like you could have easily given him double-digit millions, and it would have been nothing to your paychecks.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me, too. I don't know. I just feel like when you have somebody like that who can play all over the field and you don't really have great players at all those positions that utility guy can play, if that makes any sense, you can't really let him go because you can throw him in anywhere and he'll give you decent production at any of those spots. So I feel like they really missed an opportunity there with letting him go.
Do you have any other big surprises you'd like to go over?
Maybe not a big surprise, but I was kind of surprised that the Browns would sign another receiver, even though they did lose Terrell Pryor and Kenny Britt, just because they drafted, how many was it, 6 or 7?
You know, I wonder if that's just to bring a veteran presence into the locker room, a guy who can teach these young guys what to do and kind of teach them to be professionals, because I think that's a big thing in the NFL. I think Vic Beasley, one of the reasons he became such a stud so fast, he had a guy like Dwight Freeney in the locker room to kind of help him walk along that line. Same thing with Shane Ray on the Broncos. I think he had guys like Von Miller and especially DeMarcus Ware to help bring him up to who he is. And I think having that veteran leadership is worth the money, even if it's just a above average receiver. I like Kenny Britt. I mean, he's not Terrell Pryor in my opinion athletically by any means, but I think he can teach some of those receivers kind of how to be a pro more than Pryor could, because Pryor wasn't really a veteran receiver. He was, even though he'd been in the league for a while, he was kind of a rookie almost at that position.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, I didn't even think of it that way. I was thinking, well, you have all these guys. Maybe they just want, somebody who can fill the role while
And
they're
he's
trying to find a
consistent.
quarterback.
He's consistent.
Right.
These rookies, you don't really know, or I guess now they're all second-year guys, but you don't really know what you're going to get from them. Kenny
Yeah.
Britt, you have a much more concrete idea of who he is.
Yeah.
I think it's a decent signing. Like I said, you have all the money in the world. So if you're going to bring in leadership and a guy who's at least consistent, by all means, you need whatever you can get. But now what I want to do is I want to shift the focus to some of the top available free agents, and we're going to run through this kind of quickly so we can get to our Final Four game here at the end of the show. So just really quickly, I'm going to name the top 5 guys, in my opinion, that are available free agents, and let's talk real quick about where you think they could land. Number 1, Donta Hightower, the linebacker that played for the Patriots last season. I know he's visited a lot of different teams. Where do you think he ends up?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think he honestly goes back to New England.
I do too. I know there's been a lot of talk about him going back to New England, but he's visited so many different teams that you never really know. But they've all left with the impression after their meeting with him that he wants to go back to New England.
Yeah, I could definitely see him going back, especially because players go back there and take maybe a little less money because they know they can win there.
I also could see Bill sending him off to teams just trying to get info.
Yeah,
I could totally see that being the case. Say like, hey, I'll pay you that extra $1 million you've been trying to bargain for if you go visit with all these teams and get a little something from them. Bill plays chess when we're all playing checkers, so I could see that being the case. Next up, Adrian Peterson.
I'm still thinking either Raiders or Giants.
I right now have Raiders as probably who I think he will go to, but I think a dark horse because they lost their power back, maybe Green Bay. Stick within the division if you want to stick it back to Minnesota.
It's possible.
Let's go to the next guy, Dontari Poe.
I could see him going to Indy or maybe Cincinnati.
I think right now, a good fit for him. He just visited with them today, I believe it was, Atlanta Falcons. I think that'd be kind of interesting for him to go to a team that's a legitimate contender because I think right now he's leaning towards signing a 1-year prove-it deal, kind of like Alshon did and Terrell Pryor. I think if he wanted a long-term contract, he probably would have signed with the Colts already, but I don't think he liked the figures he was probably seeing. So if he's going to go with a 1-year prove-it deal, you might as well go to a team that could make a deep playoff run, and I think the best chance of the teams he's visited so far would be Atlanta. But he's visiting the Dolphins this Wednesday, and I was telling you, it could be very dangerous if you put him next to Ndamukong Suh in the middle of a defensive line.
Yeah, that could be interesting, especially with Wake on the end. That could be interesting.
That could be a lot of fun. Next up, Jay Cutler.
I think Jets.
I would say Jets too. We kind of talked about the Texans earlier. It's just hard because you don't know what kind of contract he's going to get. He's coming off this monstrous contract, and it's hard for players to take pay cuts. But if there's anybody who's going to need to take a pay cut from what he was earning, he's up there at the top of that list. Mm-hmm. And finally, before we go to break, the last top available free agent I want to go over with possible landing spots, Jamal Charles.
Well, Seahawks are the only ones I've really seen have put a lot of interest into him.
And apparently there's mutual interest there.
I'll say Seattle then, but I don't understand why.
I guess. I mean, I don't understand it either. It doesn't make any sense to me, but your running back core would be insane in Seattle. Maybe you start trying to ship off some of the younger guys, but that doesn't make sense because then you're just loaded with injury-prone veterans.
Yeah.
I guess Seattle's a favorite because they're the only team I've seen him linked to, but you'd think a team like the Colts could be interested.
Right. Yeah, that'd be good for them.
Yeah, I would think the Colts are maybe a good fit for him, but like you said, I've just seen very little interest on that running back market for some of these veterans, and Seattle seems to be the only one where there's mutual interest.
Yeah,